Welcome back to The Heat. We're discussing Islam and the challenges facing Muslims in Europe. Our distinguished guest is Ambassador Akbar Ahmed, and his team completed a documentary called Journey into Europe, and it's really worth a watch. And I know the companion book comes out in 2016 as well. You know, Europeans and Islam united in what is the most popular game in Europe. It is football. Let's listen to a bit from Journey into Europe, because this is really interesting.
We've got over 40, 45 Muslims playing in the Premier League.
Oh, really?
From, from Africa, from Asia, from Europe. Manchester City, just use an example of Edin Dzeko, who's a Bosnian, Samir Nasri, who's French-Moroccan. You've got Yaya Toure from Africa. You've got Demba Ba at Chelsea. You know, you've got all these kind of like high-profile people who are Muslims.
Well, he was quick to react.
When Demba Ba scores a goal, he then goes down and prostrates on the ground. You know, and you have football fans cheering his name. This normality is how we will build relationships.
It had to be the perfect pass. It had to be the perfect finish.
Ambassador, I thought that was such a wonderful moment because, you know, it seemed so normal. Someone giving praise to their creator for letting them score a goal. And football, you know, unites Europe like nothing else. And because these stars, some of them are Islam, France has a lot of Muslims on its national team. Is that a way forward? Is it so? What explains the distinction between acceptance of football players and, of course, non-acceptance of Muslims in general society?
Nathan, not just football. Football, of course, there's Europeans are so passionate about football. England, for example, you have football and cricket. You know, there was a cricket captain of Pakistani origins.
We don't mind talking about cricket, especially with Pakistan, but carry on.
Nathan, you have culture, you have media, you have scholars, Muslims contributing, interacting. Again, I go back to my earlier point. The more knowledge we have, the more understanding we have of the other, we are able to build bridges. When there's misunderstandings, there's prejudice, there's bigotry, and there's hatred. And we are living in a time when, unfortunately, certain parties, right-wing parties, are pumping a lot of hatred, a lot of misunderstanding, quite deliberate at times. You'll hear a lot of nonsense about Islam and the nature of Islam, etc., which these Europeans in this film, Jews, Christians, Muslims, refute because they are giving examples from European history. And that's what moved me in this film. I mean, the range of people we have between these two, the opening and the ending of the film. We worked very hard, by the way, to get those interviews because we had to go north, south, east, west, but we got them. People were incredibly generous with their time, with their views, and their hospitality.
I thought what really struck me about the documentary is that you had contrarian views as well. You were inclusive of people who question Islam as well. It's definitely an interesting work. Look, we have obviously the terror attacks, but obviously something on the minds of a lot of Europeans is immigration too. And because of what's happened in Syria and elsewhere on the African continent, for example, we're seeing more and more refugees. I want to play you a clip again from the film. Amadou, a young man from Guinea, coming in, hoping to improve his life, but ends up basically being beaten by the police. Let's have a listen.
One day I came to the station. One man looked me, he hit me 2 times.
Who hit you?
I don't know whether it's a policeman or what, but it's the police station. Is this boy even standing there? He looked me like this. He said, move here. He hit me 2 times. He broke me 2 times.
With his head?
Yes, he do like this 2 times. So I see I cannot do nothing. I just sit and cry. I want a place where you know that I am free. I'm not thinking about transfer or to go somewhere else. I'm thinking about to get up and go to school, or to get up and go and have work.
Amadou is what some people would label an economic migrant. He wants to do better for his family back home and go to school and earn money. How is this adding to fear of Islam in Europe?
It is, Nathan, again, because of misunderstanding. People will look at Amadou and say, here's a potential terrorist. That is why we spent deliberately a lot of time with him, and his story was very powerful. My American team, wonderful, very dedicated young men, Frankie, Harrison, and of course, Amine and Zinat. The American boys, hardened, battle-weary, they'd been with me in so many other research projects, they had tears in their eyes. It was so moving. Nathan, a young boy of 16, travels right across Africa through the Sahara, simply pushed by the desire to make some money so he can go home and help his family in Gambia. You know, he's the eldest of the family. He had a sense of honor and pride. Now, Europeans will see him as a potential terrorist. So we must put the refugees, the immigrants, in the context of the chaos in the Middle East, the political chaos, and the economic collapse in so many parts of Africa. It isn't that Africans and the Middle East people want to come to Europe. Suddenly, overnight, they have a desire to live in Europe. It is because they're being pushed out because of conditions in their countries.
There's a choice, isn't there, within governments, within all of us, to either accept or reject. One person who you interviewed was the former Archbishop of Canterbury, the head of the church in the UK, Rowan Williams, and he set this up very simply. Let's have a listen.
When you realise you've not really got close to your neighbours, you can either panic or you can say, well, it's time I started, isn't it? So either you react with projecting all sorts of mysterious and terrible things onto them, or you sit with them and listen. We, in Europe and elsewhere, simply need to educate ourselves about what Islam really is. We need to listen very hard to the average Muslim neighbour, not the extremist voice, but to the real variety that you'll hear outside any mosque on a Friday. To listen to the experience of those who are unobtrusively but faithfully living ordinary Muslim lives fully within our society. Listen to them.
It's an interesting choice there that the former Archbishop of Canterbury sets up. I know your film and your book is about Europe, but let's talk about the United States where we sit right now. How does that compare to what we're hearing out of the mouths of some politicians running for president, like Donald Trump, for example, who wants, he says, to track Muslims, create a database? That must worry you.
Nathan, people like Donald Trump, not him alone, other presidential candidates really need to sit down and see this film. It'll educate them, it'll enlighten them, and I hope it'll temper and mold the statements that are coming out from these very distinguished leaders and possibly of the future president of the United States about Islam. Because here you're hearing the Archbishop of Canterbury, the former Archbishop, a very distinguished scholar, by the way. And we were very fortunate. We got some very distinguished chief rabbis and grand muftis and archbishops, real people of God, people with a spiritual vision of the world. And he simply says, you have to educate yourself about Islam. I would go further. I would say you need to re-educate yourself about Islam, referring to Andalusia. So people like Donald Trump and all these people who talk about Islam with this very casual...
On a Republican trip to Andalusia and Sicily?
I would say if not to Andalusia, at least sit down and watch the film one evening, maybe in one grand convention, get them all together and
But it's not just Donald Trump. In your film, you saw British politicians like that, German politicians, obviously a minority. But that must worry you that you can connect the dots everywhere.
Nathan, I am connecting the dots, so it doesn't worry me, because for every right-wing nut job, if you like, as we showed in Bradford, you have the Bishop of Bradford. And what impressed me so much about the Bishop of Bradford, again, as a man of God, when these people, these right-wing people, walked into a mosque with their shoes on and began to wave the Bible around, the bishop says, the Bible is not a weapon of war. I mean, what a marvelous thing to say. He said, this is an outrage. This is the bishop. Then we had the Lord Mayor of Bradford, who happens to be a Muslim, a Pakistani background. Again, he's horrified. These people marched into his house. They brushed aside his daughter and came into his house. Now, can you imagine they're doing this sort of thing to any other mayor if he had not been a Muslim? But yet they felt that because he's a Muslim, they can push him around. So this film, because I've been very rigorous in putting together opposing views, not just Muslim views, it allows us to draw our own conclusions and gives us hope in the end that there are enough people of goodwill, of good sense, who want to create bridges. I think that's the biggest message of this film.